I used to think a contract marriage was simple. We'd play our parts, and when the contract was up, we'd go our separate ways. I just never imagined I'd be the one to cross the line. You really want to leave me that badly, Ethan? I'm your wife. If you're so determined to go, then the silver glint behind her back burned into my eyes. Only later did I understand that I was the one she'd been searching for all along. Her long-lost light in the dark. Across the dinner table, I watched the cool, elegant mask on Victoria Clark's face and decided to take the plunge. Victoria, we should probably find some time to head down to the courthouse. The fork in her hand paused midair for a fraction of a second before continuing its journey to her plate as if nothing had happened. The courthouse? What for? I blinked, a giant question mark materializing over my head. Seriously, what was this? Her expression seemed genuine. Was this a classic case of the rich being too busy to remember the little things? I set my own fork down and looked her straight in the eye. The contract is almost up. We need to file for the divorce. Her expression was as placid as a frozen lake, but I saw her knuckles turn white around her fork. There's still a few days left, aren't there? Her voice was as flat and emotionless as ever. It was perfectly in character for the Ice Queen CEO of Clark Industries. I rubbed my hands together, a jolt of excitement running through me. Well, I know you've been swamped lately, so I figure we could get it over with. It's not like, we'll deal with it then, she cut in, her words coming out just a little too fast. I'm done eating. I'm going back to my room. She stood and walked away. Watching her retreat, I got the strangest feeling. She was fleeing. I shook my head, laughing at myself. No way. She probably just had a rough day at the office. After clearing the table, I went back to my own room. Mine was on the first floor. Victoria's was on the second. For 2 years, we'd lived in the same house like ghosts, following our own separate paths. But over the last 6 months, something had changed. Victoria had started appearing near my room at odd hours. A few times, I caught her, and she'd looked startled, muttering something about being thirsty and needing a glass of water. I never bought it, of course, but I didn't dwell on it. I just chalked it up to some weird rich person quirk. Sometimes a dangerous thought would flicker through my mind. What if she's into me? But I'd always snuff it out immediately. Come on. I had at least that much self-awareness. A wealthy heir is falling for a broke nobody. That kind of thing only happens in cheesy romance novels. In real life, it was impossible unless Victoria Clark had lost her mind. And for what I could tell, her mind was perfectly intact. She was sharp as a tack. We were in the same graduating class at Columbia. After all, I launched my own startup right after graduation 3 years ago. It was just started to gain traction when my grandpa, the only family I had left, was diagnosed with cancer. I sold the company without a second thought, but the money wasn't enough. The cost of his treatment was a black hole I couldn't fill. That's when Victoria Clark found me. She offered me $2 million to be her husband on paper for 2 years. How could I say no? For a guy as desperate as I was, it was the deal of a lifetime. The money was a lifeline, but it wasn't enough to save him. 5 months after I signed her contract, Grandpa was gone and I was completely alone. Damn it. Thinking about the past again, pathetic. I wiped a tear from the corner of my eye, pulled the covers over my head, and tried to fall asleep. Just as I was drifting off, I heard the doorknob to my room turning. What the hell was this place haunted? I flicked on the lamp and walked to the door. When I opened it, Victoria was standing there. She looked like she just stepped out of shower, her skin flushed and glowing. Water droplets clung to the ends of her dark hair, framing a face that could only be described as ethereal. Ethan, she said, her eyes meeting mine for a second before darting to the floor. My shower head is broken. Can I use yours? She was tall, but I was taller. From my vantage point, my gaze involuntarily dropped to the stunning valley revealed by the V-neck of her robe. Damn it, Ethan, turn off the auto-aim. I snapped my eyes back up to her face. Isn't there a shower in the guest bathroom? I asked, genuinely confused. Her head snapped up, her expression still unreadable. The guest room. It hasn't been used in so long. It feels strange. Fine, whatever. Go ahead. I'll be in the living room. I stepped aside to let her pass. Thanks, she murmured, back to being a woman of few words. I sat on the living room couch and pulled out my phone, scrolling through TikTok to kill time. This was getting weird. For the past month, Victoria had been acting stranger and stranger. Before she'd check in on me every few days, a quick polite inquiry. Now she was showing up to use my shower. Something was very, very wrong. It was almost enough to make me think she was into me. But I dismissed the thought again. It didn't make any sense. So, what else could it be? A video popped up on my screen. The caption read, "Shocking woman seduces landlord to avoid rent, then accuses him of rape. He gets 3 years in prison. She gets 3 years rent-free." Rent? No, she wouldn't. My mind started racing. The $2 million. She was paying it in yearly installments. That meant she still owed me $1 million. Was it possible she didn't want to pay? That would explain why she'd been coming home from the office looking so tense lately. Maybe the company was in trouble. Was she trying to get a final payment? The more I thought about it, the more plausible it seemed. Why else would she be dragging her feet on the divorce? A few days wouldn't normally matter to someone like her. Click. The sound of the bathroom door opening pulled me from my thoughts. She walked out wrapped only in a towel. I immediately looked away. The evidence was mounting. She was trying to trap me to get out of paying what she owed. The TikTok video had put me on high alert, and seeing her like this, well, it was having an effect. I took a few deep breaths to clear my head and decided to go on the offensive. "Victoria, is something bothering you?" She paused, towel drying her hair, and sat down on the far end of the couch. "What makes you say that?" "I'm fine." "I don't know. You just seemed on edge lately." I thought maybe something was up with the company. I scooted a little further away from her. Based on that response, the company was probably fine, which meant she wasn't likely to stiff me on the money. Still, I needed to be careful. I woke up feeling fantastic. Today was going to be a great day. I threw a few shadow punches at the air. Awesome. Humming a tune, I got dressed and opened my door. In 3 days, the contract would be up and I was going to find a new place in the suburbs. The last thing I needed was for a real boyfriend, the one that got away, her white moonlight, to show up and scream, "Get out, you loser." How humiliating would that be? Better to make a clean break. Though, now that I thought about it, I didn't think she had one. When we signed a contract, she said something about her family pressuring her to get married. I shook my head. Whatever. Not my problem. She was just my boss. 3 more days and it would be bye-bye. See you never. I opened my door and froze. Victoria was sitting on the living room couch directly opposite my room, already dressed and watching me. There was a complex emotion in her eyes I couldn't quite decipher. I stood there for a beat before forcing a smile. "Morning, Victoria. You're taking the day off." She rose gracefully, smoothing down her clothes. "I am. Are you free today?" My stomach dropped. What does she mean by that? Is she finally ready to end things? 1,000 thoughts raced through my head. That would be great, actually. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She walked toward me, her gaze lingering on my face for a few seconds. "Let's get breakfast first. We can talk while we eat." I followed her to the dining room, slightly bewildered. A lavish breakfast was already spread across the table. I dug in without hesitation. It wasn't every day I got to enjoy a free meal like this. Rich people really knew how to live. Victoria seemed to read my mind. She allowed a soft sigh. "What are your plans for today?" I was thinking of going out for a bit. I put down my fork. I was actually going to go look for an apartment, but that's no problem. "Where do you want to go?" "I can take you." The glass of milk she was drinking stopped just short of her lips. She was silent for a moment. "You that eager to move out?" "I just don't want to be in your way," I said carefully. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "You're not in the way. You can move out when the time comes." I had no idea what to make of her mood swings. This was only the second time she'd ever asked me to go out with her. The first was when we had to get our wedding photos taken. She'd taken one look at my shabby clothes and dragged me on a mandatory shopping trip. I didn't know why she suddenly wanted to hang out, but she was the boss, my benefactor. The customer is always right. After her declaration, Victoria just sat there not eating. Most of the breakfast ended up in my stomach. When I looked up, her eyes were fixed on me. I felt a little awkward and gave a sheepish laugh. Must be going through a second growth spurt. "I'm starving." Victoria didn't respond. She just stood up. "Go change. We're going out." I rushed back to my room and threw on some casual clothes. When I came out, she was waiting by the door. She was wearing a simple white dress, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Without her usual power suit and severe expression, she looked less like a cold CEO and more gentle. I drove. I'd expected her to sit in the back, but she slid into the passenger seat. She didn't speak, just watched the city blur past the window. Driving a luxury car had its perks. Other drivers gave us a wide berth. We reached the city's most upscale mall without hitting any traffic. I followed a few steps behind her as she headed toward the movie theater. I was confused. Shouldn't we be browsing designer stores? She must have sensed my confusion. Her lips parted slightly. I want to see a movie. Can you go get some popcorn? An order from the boss was an order I had to follow. No problem. After buying the popcorn, I joined her in the theater. As I sat down next to her, I realized I hadn't even asked what we were seeing. It was strange. I'd never known her to be a movie person. What we watching? I asked, munching on popcorn as I turned to her. The theater was still lit and sitting in silence felt awkward. Before sunrise, the lights dimmed at that exact moment. I couldn't see her expression, but her voice sounded odd, almost like a character from a sad romantic indie film. I knew the movie. Two strangers meet, connect deeply over one night, and then have to part ways at dawn. It's all about the fleeting, pure nature of love. I shrugged. Fleeting love. Please, not a chance. Do you believe in that? Victoria turned to look at me, her gaze intense, and love at first sight. I was completely lost. We sit through a 2-hour movie that I'm mostly zoned out for. And this is her takeaway. An ice queen like her believing in spontaneous romance. I figured she'd be the type to methodically eliminate any obstacle between her and her one true love, not fall for some random guy on a train. But she was the boss, so I gave an honest answer. No, that stuff only happens in movies. I don't either, she said. Let's go somewhere else. The credits rolled and the lights came up just like the dawn in the film. Victoria walked straight toward the exit. I was still processing when I saw her disappearing down the aisle and scrambled to follow, clutching the popcorn bucket. She walked fast, every inch the corporate powerhouse. Outside the theater, she finally slowed down. She glanced back at me. Let's get something to eat. I nodded eagerly and followed her to a chic, expensive-looking restaurant in the mall. The lighting was soft, the music mellow. We sat across from each other. Victoria ordered for us with practiced ease while I sat there feeling out of place. While we waited for the food, she toyed with her silverware. Ethan, she said suddenly, sometimes I envy the people in movies. They can just say how they feel. I looked at her surprised, not knowing what to say. The food arrived and I ate in silence, my mind churning over her bizarre behavior and cryptic comments. Victoria barely touched her plate, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. After dinner, we wandered through the mall. We passed a jewelry store and Victoria stopped at the window, her gaze lost in the glittering diamonds. I stood beside her quietly, afraid to break the spell. After a long moment, she turned to me. Ethan, what do you do if one day you realize your life feels incomplete without someone in it? My heart stuttered. I had a strong feeling she was talking about something specific, but I didn't dare assume. I chose my words carefully. Maybe you should look inside yourself and figure out just how important that person really is to you. Victoria sighed softly and said nothing more. We kept walking, but the air around us felt heavy, charged with unspoken words. When we got back from the mall yesterday, Victoria, for the first time I could remember, had a few glasses of wine. Back at the house, she got a little handsy. Is that a thing with people who drink? Of course. I righteously refused her advances. No way. How many women who claw their way to a CEO position are simple? The last thing I needed was to get a new state-sponsored job that involved making license plates. Today was the college reunion. A 5-year reunion, I guess. It was being held right here in the city and I had the time, so I figured why not. I took the elevator up to the 6th floor of the Astral Hotel. I could hear the roar of the party before I even reached the private room. Ethan, as soon as I walked in, Dave, our old class president, spotted me. He came over with the same warm smile he always had. I remember back in school, I was just some quiet kid from small town, completely ordinary, except for maybe being decent looking. I barely talked to anyone. And since it was an economics program at Columbia, the class was full of kids from powerful families. I doubted anyone else would even recognize me. I was right. Besides Dave, nobody even glanced my way. Dave, long time no see. Still looking sharp, I said, clapping him on the shoulder. You've been good to me in college. Glad you can make it. Grab a seat. We've got a special guest showing up later. Right on. I found an empty chair in a corner. The corner was perfect. I could focus on the food. I just sat down when I overheard a few people talking. You guys think the class beauty Victoria Clark will show? One of them, a guy in glasses who looked like a finance bro, asked. I couldn't remember his name, but I recognized the pudgy guy he was talking to. Bobby Hayes. His family had money. She's a major CEO, super busy. No way she'd come to this. Bobby said glumly. I seem to recall hearing he tried to ask Victoria out back in the day. Sitting next to me was a sweet-looking girl from my old project group, Sierra Chan. I remembered her well. She smiled at me. Ethan, how's that company of yours doing? I gave a weak smile. Went bankrupt a long time ago. I'm not cut out for it. Better off as an employee. Her eyes widened. What? But you were doing so well. How? Before she could finish, Dave cut in, his voice booming. Everyone, look who's here. He gestured dramatically toward the entrance. Like everyone else, I turned to see who the VIP was. It can't be Victoria, I thought to myself. Impossible. She was too busy. Besides that weird mall trip yesterday, I never seen her do anything remotely social. But when the person stepped into the light, my jaw dropped. It was Victoria Clark. She wore a simple, elegant white dress that somehow made her look even more untouchable. Her makeup was subtle. Her hair styled in a graceful updo. Her arrival silenced the room. She walked in like she owned the place, a spotlight following her. Bobby Hayes' gloomy face instantly lit up. He hurried over to her. Victoria, you actually came. I thought you'd blow us off. Victoria gave him a barely perceptible nod, polite but distant. Her eyes scanned the room and finally landed on me. For a split second, I saw something flicker in their depths. Dave hurried over. Victoria, so glad you could make it. Come sit over here. You've really made our reunion special. Victoria murmured a quiet thank you and then, to my astonishment, walked directly toward my corner. She looked at Sierra, who was sitting next to me. Excuse me, she said softly. My sit. I stared at her. The seat she was pointing to was the one Sierra was currently occupying. What's she doing? Does she expect the girl to stand? Sierra, however, seemed to sense the strange current in the air. She quickly stood up and moved away. Of course, go ahead. Everyone stared, and I was just as stunned. The Victoria I knew, the one who hated these kinds of events, not only showed up, but was now acting this way. It was completely out of character. She sat down next to me and leaned in. Her voice a low whisper only I could hear. Did you come to this reunion just to go on a date with Sierra? I was taking a sip of water and nearly choked. What was wrong with her? That's the first thing she says. She was leaning a little too close. I shifted away. Victoria, I think that's my private business, isn't it? Our contract explicitly stated we wouldn't interfere in each other's private lives once it was over. This was bizarre. The hand she had wrapped around her glass tightened. I could feel a wave of tension coming off her. We're not divorced yet, she said, her voice tight. As far as I'm concerned, I should be your priority. I was floored, completely baffled by why she was suddenly so possessive. Okay, Victoria, you're right. My mistake, I said quickly, hoping to de-escalate whatever this was. The rest of the reunion was surprisingly normal. No big dramatic showdowns. But Victoria's behavior grew more and more unusual. Eat this, she said, placing a piece of steak on my plate. As she did, she shot a subtle, hard look at Sierra. It was quick, but I saw it. At that moment, even a guy as dense as me could figure it out. One of the three great delusions of a man's life, but this time it felt real. She liked me. The other people at our table saw her feed me, their faces turned into masks of gossip, their eyes darting between me and Victoria. Victoria, I can get it myself, but she leaned in closer, her lips brushing my ear. Her voice was a soft, seductive murmur. Isn't a wife's job to feed her husband? A shiver went down my spine. Her voice was so intoxicating, my neck instinctively recoiled. I turned to look at her and saw, hidden deep in her eyes, a triumphant smile. It was 8 or 9 by the time we got home. I don't know what possessed Victoria at the reunion, going on about being my wife and drinking so much. The wine had brought a captivating blush to her cheeks, and her eyes were hazy and unfocused. I helped her to her room and laid her on the bed, looking at her drunken state. I shook my head. Seriously, getting this wasted with a man you barely know around. Do you trust me that much? I took off her shoes and wiped her face with a damp cloth. As I leaned over to pull the covers over her, she shot out a hand and grabbed my arm. I was already off balance, and her pull sent me tumbling right on top of her. Well, hey, this wasn't my fault. You started it. Don't wake up tomorrow and blame me. I said quickly, trying to reason with her unconscious form. She wrapped her arms and legs around me like an octopus, holding me tight. Her face nuzzled into my neck, and I felt the warm, moist touch of her lips. A jolt went through me. What was happening? She mumbled something, her voice thick with sleep. Please don't go. I need you. Oh, I get it. She thinks I'm someone else. That explains it. I gently pried her arms off me, tucked her into bed, and closed the door behind me. Standing in the living room, I stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the scattered stars in the night sky and let out a long breath. One day left, then I get the money and I'm gone. Tomorrow, I'll go look at some apartments for real. I gave myself a mental pep talk. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming my face. I was alive, and it was another beautiful day. After tomorrow, I was going to be free to live my own life. Maybe even find a real relationship. A life without experiencing love would be a life wasted. After my shower, I checked the time. 9:30 a.m. Victoria should be at work by now. Yes, time to fly. But when I opened my door, my heart sank. There she was again, sitting in the living room, her eyes fixed on me. Victoria, don't you have to work? It's a weekday, I said, trying to sound cheerful. The thought of my impending freedom had put a spring in my step, and it probably leaked into my voice. Heeked into my voice. You seem happy, she observed. She was wearing casual clothes and light makeup today, giving off a girl next door vibe, if you ignore the Arctic frost on her face. But yeah, the weather's great, and I'm going to go look at some apartments today. Huh? I sidestepped the real reason for my good mood, not wanting to upset the boss. I'll go with you, she said, standing up. I know some people in real estate. My mind went numb. No, there was no way I was letting her come with me. What if her secret boyfriend found out where I lived and came after me? I was about to refuse, but she didn't give me the chance. She walked over, took my arm, and pulled me toward the door. The amount of physical contact between us had skyrocketed these past few days. It wasn't normal. I was driving again, heading toward the suburbs where new developments were popping up, you know, she said, breaking the silence. You don't have to move out so quickly. I live alone. You're not bothering me. Her tone was unusually soft. She was looking out the window, but her words were meant for me. A deal's a deal, I said, choosing my words with care, not wanting to set off her unpredictable temper. Besides, what if you bring someone home one day? It would be awkward for me to be there. I don't have any other male friends, she stated coldly. Maybe because it was our last day together, I felt a strange urge to see her as a person, not just a client. Do you have someone you like? Someone overseas? Maybe. He's here in the country, she said, turning to look at me, her gaze searing. Then why didn't you just ask him to sign a contract? I was genuinely curious. Her original excuse was that her family was pressuring her, but after we got the marriage license, she never introduced me to them. She just took my copy of the certificate and disappeared with it. Right. She still hasn't given it back. She started to say before she could finish, the car driving normally in front of us swerved violently. Its headlights aimed directly at us. It was accelerating. My instinct screamed. I yanked the steering wheel to the right. But in that split second, Victoria moved with impossible speed. Her hand, cold and trembling, clamped down on mine like a vice. With a strength I couldn't fight, she wrenched the steering wheel back to the left, pulling the car and the point of impact directly toward her side. The world exploded in a deafening crash. The sound was a physical blow, a thunderclap that left my ears ringing. The other car, a wild beast, slammed into us. Our car buckled and spun. I felt a dizzying, sickening lurch as the world turned upside down, and then my consciousness dissolved into blackness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Thanks to Victoria's reinforced luxury car, I'd only suffered minor injuries. My first thought was of her. I sat up, a wave of urgency washing over me. In that final critical moment, she had put herself in harm's way to save me. A feeling I couldn't name twisted in my gut. I got her room number from a nurse and walked in. She was lying on the bed, her face pale. The doctor said her injuries weren't life-threatening, but she would need time to recover. I stared at her pale, perfect face, my mind a complete mess. If the car hadn't been reinforced, would she be dead? If I hadn't been distracted, trying to make small talk, would the crash have even happened? It was just a contract. Why would she risk her life for me? I was lost. My resolve was crumbling. It's funny how people are. You push away what's freely given, but the moment you're about to lose it, you hesitate. Was I hesitating? Maybe. A man will remember a beautiful woman his entire life, just as he'll never forget the one who showed him small, unexpected kindness. Victoria had just seared her memory into my soul. From now on, every time I got behind the wheel of a car, I would think of her, the woman who chose to take the hit for me. I didn't know if this was right or wrong. But based on her behavior over the last 6 months, I had to finally admit the truth. She had feelings for me. The only problem was I didn't want to be the other man. I never had a chance to ask her about her supposed true love. And now this had happened. One step at a time. First, I take care of her until she was out of the hospital. I owed her at least that much. A few hours later, she slowly opened her eyes. She stared at me without blinking, and I saw a wave of relief wash over her face. Seeing her expression, I couldn't help but speak. Should I call your parents? And don't worry, I'll take care of you until you're discharged. She shook her head weakly, her voice a fragile whisper. I don't have. Okay. The doctor said you shouldn't talk. Just rest. I pulled the blanket up over her and went to get her some dinner. A fortnight flew by. It was time for Victoria to be discharged. Back at the penthouse, I went to my room and started to pack. I still had to leave. We'd known each other for over 2 years. I could consider her a friend now. When I had asked her in the hospital why she hadn't made a deal with the person she actually liked, she just looked at me silently. I wasn't arrogant enough to think she was talking about me. We'd barely spoken a word to each other in 4 years of college. My belongings were few. A couple of changes of clothes and the one thing that truly mattered, a framed photo of me and my grandpa. I carefully placed everything in my suitcase and shut the lid. With that soft click, this chapter of my life, this strange contractual arrangement was closing. I was ready for whatever came next. When I walked into the living room, she was sitting on the couch perfectly still. The air around her felt heavy with silence. My care over the past 2 weeks had brought some color back to her cheeks, a faint blush that hinted at returning life. I had expected her to go straight to the office after being discharged, but she had followed me back here instead. She stood up slowly, her eyes locked on mine. You're leaving now? You're sweating. Here, drink some water. I nodded, took the glass she offered, and drank it all in one go. I was thirsty after all the packing. I set the empty glass down, grabbed my suitcase, and walked toward the front door. I turned back to look at her. Let's go, Victoria. The courthouse should be open now. She didn't answer, just kept staring at me. Her gaze unnervingly intense. And then, as our eyes met, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The world began to tilt and spin violently. In the last moment before I collapsed, I saw her face. It was calm, but her eyes were red-rimmed. And behind them, I saw a terrifying possessive madness. I'm screwed. That was my final thought. When I came to, my head was thick and foggy, my thoughts slow and jumbled. I was surrounded by an oppressive inky blackness that felt suffocating. I could feel that I was on a bed and the air was filled with a familiar scent. Her scent. I tried to sit up. The moment I moved my wrist, the silence was shattered by the sharp metallic clink of a chain. The sound was like a thunderclap instantly clearing the fog from my brain. A chain? What the hell was this? Some kind of sick game? I forced down the rising panic and called out, my voice louder than I intended. Victoria. Victoria, click. The sound was sharp. A blinding light cut through the darkness, stabbing at my eyes. Victoria glided into the room, but she wasn't dressed in her usual power suits or simple dresses. She was wearing a sheer silk robe. Her flawless skin a pale silhouette beneath the translucent fabric. And behind her, something glinted, a flash of silver that made my eyes ache. Victoria, what is this? Some kind of role-playing game? I tried to force a smile, hoping a joke could break the suffocating tension. She didn't seem to hear me. She just kept walking one slow step at a time until she was standing over the bed. Her perfect lips parted and her voice was a trembling, wounded whisper. Ethan, why do you always try to leave me? We're married. We're husband and wife. Her hand came to rest on my face, her touch soft and cool, but her words sent a chill down my spine. This was just like some twisted scene from a dark romance novel. Victoria, listen, I said, trying to interrupt her to break the spell. Her hand was already drifting down toward my stomach. We just had a contract. If you're your real love, the one you've been waiting for, finds out about this, what will he think? Don't you get it? She whispered, leaning so close her breath warmed my ear. The one I've always wanted. It's you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? This had to be a joke. Victoria, you can't be serious. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Don't worry, she murmured, her voice turning husky. You'll see how serious I am soon enough. Before I could react, she pushed a small blue pill into my mouth. I'm finished. Afterward, she lay beside me, tracing lazy circles on my chest with her fingertip. Do you believe me now? She asked, her face flushed, her eyes fixed on me with a dizzying intensity. I stared at the crimson stain on the white sheets, a single stark blossom. My mind was a complete blank. Why? I finally managed to ask, why would you do this? We didn't even know each other before. I couldn't comprehend it. Her actions were beyond anything I could rationalize. You see, you really did forget, she said, a trace of melancholy in her voice. What is some classic cliché? The poor kid saves the rich girl from kidnappers, and she grows up and repays him with her love. I look her dead in the eye, voicing the most insane plot I could think of. Do you know how I got this scar? She pulled the covers away, revealing a pale, puckered scar on her shoulder. It looked like an old burn. Ow. I was utterly bewildered. Starlight Children's Home, she whispered. Rosie, my blood ran cold. No way. It really was a goddamn cliché, and I was living in it. I had been at Starlight before my grandpa adopted me. Is this fate? I turned my head to stare at the wall. Of course, I had you investigated, she said, her voice regaining some strength. I know it sounds crazy, but I never forgot you. You know, I could have tolerated the darkness had I not seen the light. When my family found me and took me back, they already had 2 other children. They didn't care about a missing daughter they'd already replaced. The only good thing about going back was having enough food and warm clothes. They treated me like I was bad luck. But it didn't matter. My grandmother cared, so I worked step by step to tear them down. Now I have more money than I could ever spend. You don't have to leave me, okay? As she spoke, her eyes welled up with tears. I sighed. A blended family, parents who favor their other kids. She had the whole tragic backstory starter pack. Then why didn't you just tell me this sooner? I asked, confused. Because I'm sick, she confessed. Every time I saw you, I had this uncontrollable urge to lock you away, to keep you all to myself. My therapist, Dr. Phillips, said that's not what a healthy relationship looks like. So, I've been in treatment. I was doing better. And that's when I finally worked up the nerve to find you 2 years ago. But when you were about to leave, I just couldn't stand it. She lowered her head like a child who'd been caught doing something wrong. Then she looked up again, a desperate light shining in her eyes. Ethan, I want to see your grandpa before he passed. I told him I was your wife. He was so happy. He made me promise to take good care of you. Her head tilted up like a child desperate for praise. Do you know how hard it was for me at that reunion? Seeing you talk to Sierra, I almost lost control right there. She lowered her head again, tears finally spilling over and dripping from her chin. So, I decided I had to do something crazy. Otherwise, you'd really be gone. I don't know why you were so convinced I had someone else I was in love with. It's always been you. You were my light in the darkness. Ethan, please don't leave me. Okay. She wrapped her arms around me, holding on for dear life. Her tears fell on my chest, hot as fire, searing my very soul. I was stunned, unable to form a reply. My emotions were a tangled mess, a roller coaster ride from wanting to escape to this. This 5-alarm fire of shock, pity, and something else I couldn't yet name. They say it takes 100 lifetimes of chance to cross paths, 1,000 to share a pillow. Maybe this was just fate.